All right, and welcome to Hat-Trick Sports Talk, another Friday show as always. And as always, joining me is Brannan and Shane. How you guys doing today?
Doing well. How about you?
Good. How about you, Brannan?
Pretty good.
Good. All right, let's get started with some retirement news. We had two major retirements, both in the NFL and the NBA this week. We start with Julian Edelman. He announced his retirement at 34 years of age. He had knee issues for the last couple of years. It was pretty bad towards the end of this season. So he ended up failing a physical this week and then ended up deciding to hang up his cleats. Is Julian Edelman a Hall of Famer? Yes or no? Brandon, you start first.
Okay, so I think first there's a caveat here, right? So I got this from listening to sports radio and local radio, and they actually had a really good point. Julian Edelman in the regular season is not a Hall of Famer. Julian Edelman in the postseason is 1,000% a Hall of Famer. I would argue that at least 4 or 5 that Tom Brady does not have at least 4 or 5 of his rings.
Julian has 3,
without
so it'd be
Julian
the 3.
Edelman.
It would be the
Yeah.
3 rings.
Like, right, those 3 and like those 3 rings he doesn't get without Julian Edelman. Because
I would say 2.
he's well, but
still,
here's the thing.
point
Julian
stands.
Edelman is he's one of the most clutch wide receivers in the playoffs of all time. It's literally Jerry Rice then him in terms of most touchdowns in the postseason.
And catches, I think.
Now, am I going to compare him to Jerry Rice? Hell no, because Jerry Rice has so many. He was a great wide receiver in both regular season and postseason.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he'll make it in. I think he's one of those guys that was always a household name for me as a wide receiver for a while, especially during the heyday of the Patriots. I mean, it was – so I don't know. I would personally say yes, because I think being good in the playoffs is a better skill than being good in the regular season.
I think that's true. I think you make a valid point with the postseason piece. Shane, your thoughts on, is Julian Edelman a Hall of Famer?
I think most people are saying that he shouldn't be. And I think he absolutely should be. At first I was in the camp that no, he shouldn't be, but then I really thought about it and I looked at everything. And yeah, I mean, Brannan said he was very clutch in the playoffs, which is big, obviously. But something else that I think is worth noting with him is that he was that kind of player who was willing to do anything.
7th round pick out of Kent State. Look at him as a quarterback, going all the way from a punt returner to a kick returner to a wide receiver and a Super Bowl champion.
Right. And I mean, he in his early years, he even played defense a little bit, and he was really pretty good at everything. And just having, the fact that he was a pure athlete combined with the way that he did perform and just his mental determination to be a great player. Yeah, I mean, I think he absolutely deserves to be in the Hall. I mean, it's some of the, he was the Super Bowl MVP, and in the Super Bowl before that, he had one of the greatest Super Bowl catches ever. I mean, to be fair, it was probably a little luck, but still.
That's one of my favorite catches of all time.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the thing. Every time I think of those 3 Super Bowls that the Patriots won with him, I don't think of Brady or Gronk or whatever. I think of Edelman. That's the thing for me. You know what I mean? I think about what he did because he was the one that I saw in those games and thought, wow, that guy's cool, or whatever. Or like, yeah, that guy's great. So And just everything he overcame, and then still getting and being a great player. Yeah, I mean, I think he should be, but that's my own thought.
My thought process is a little bit different with this because it really matters who's the pool of guys that he's competing with 6 years down the road and beyond. Because as Brandon and I talked about, and I know you talked about this as well, Shane, when we talked about the Hall of Fame last year, or I think 2 years ago, we looked at the class and we're like, oh my God, this class is crazy. So many guys are just not going to go in. I look at Julian Edelman and think that the regular season is probably what's going to stop him from going in, not because he doesn't deserve to go in, but because the classes are going to continue to get better and better and better. The pool is going to continue to get better and better. And I think it's going to be harder and harder for him to get in then at the end of the day, because I don't see the media going, yeah, the postseason's enough over a free safety or another wide receiver or quarterback that could be in that class in 6 years.
Yeah, I mean, even during the regular season, he still led his team in receptions and receiving yards and all this, and he'd get, sometimes 100 catches in a year. But yeah, it's when you compare him to other people in the regular season, it's not, he's definitely not the first guy that comes to mind. Let's put it that way. Right?
And don't get me wrong, in 6 years, the class could fade. It could probably not be that good, but I don't see that happening. I really don't, but I don't know who would be options 6 years down the road. Who knows who else retires in the next however many years or who stays left in past years. But that's my main thing. And this is not, we're going to get to LaMarcus Aldridge in a bit in his retirement. He's going to get in the Hall of Fame. He's going to get in the Basketball Hall of Fame easy because that's the Basketball Hall of Fame. It's easy to get in. Everyone gets in. I think LaMarcus deserves to get in, but he's going to get in because that Basketball Hall of Fame is the Basketball Hall of Fame. It's easy. Football is a different animal. It's harder to get in, and it's going to get harder now more than ever.
Yeah. I mean, I do think one thing about receivers is that so many of the great receivers right now are really young, which that does benefit him, I think. But yeah, I mean, regardless of whether he gets in or not, I mean, the guy still had an incredible career. I don't think that'll be like the crowned achievement for him.
No, I don't think that's
Nor
the case.
should it be.
I don't think it is for many players in the Hall of Fame is the Hall of Fame, but we all look at what they did in their careers that matters. Brandon, do you kind of see my point though that the Hall of Fame is just getting better and the talent's just getting better?
I mean, yeah, but I don't know. There's a part of me that feels like he won't be. I don't think he'll get in his first try, but I think he'll get in like eventually. Because I'm looking at some of these possibility class lists, and like you've got guys like Andre Johnson and Steve Smith Sr. And I'm like, I personally feel like I would put
you probably put him above.
I would
him,
put someone who performed well in the playoffs and had a fairly good career.
Over those guys.
And I think a lot of what people take a little bit too much is like Pro Bowl, because a lot of these, when they're talking about what they did in their career, it's like, 8-time Pro Bowler, 6-time Pro Bowler, 16-time Pro.
All
Pro
pro
Bowl-
matters so much more. All
Pro
pro
Bowl-
matters so much more.
Right.
Yeah.
But like
Yep.
when you're reading these things, it's like, okay, Pro Bowl, nobody gives a shit if they went to the Pro Bowl. What I care about is, did you make the playoffs? Did you win in the playoffs? Did you have a good career in the playoffs? Because I don't know, maybe I'm different, but like playoffs is where you either put up or shut up as a player.
Let's put this into perspective on what matters for Hall of Fame eligibility. What matters for Hall of Fame eligibility is regular season statistics, postseason statistics, Super Bowls, all the other awards, MVP, even the Walter Payton Man of the Year, because that is one of the most prestigious awards in the league. All that counts. And then it's, well, yeah, those are pretty much, and then all pros. Pro Bowl is at the bottom of that list. I don't even think it qualifies even anymore because guys can get in, regardless of last year with COVID and everything. In most years, guys drop out and guys like Mitchell Trubisky or a Teddy Bridgewater gets in, and that gets put on their resume, even though they weren't even that good that year. So I think for guys like Andre Johnson, though, that was when the Pro Bowl was kind of ending to be valuable. It was in the early 2000s. So I think it still matters at some level from like when the Pro Bowl started to like 2010 or 11.
Yeah.
That's I think it does matter to some extent,
yeah,
but it just isn't anymore. But I think when you're looking at that perspective,
I do see. I mean, I do see what you mean by like the people being in the Pro Bowl, like the list of players who would still be around to even possibly get into the Hall of Fame. Just gets deeper and deeper. I mean, like all these players who have been great. I mean, if everybody gets into the Hall of Fame who's eligible, and then there's still people left over in 2027 would be like Sean Alexander, Eric Berry, Navarro Bowman, Jari Evans, James Harrison. Like,
it'd be hard for me to not put Edelman over a few.
Hines Ward.
Reggie
Wayne.
Get in really early.
He's probably going to get in. It's going to be interesting because I think we're going to see a lot of defensive players get in over wide receivers. And that would be an interesting conversation to have, is looking at who's eligible when and being like, okay, who do we think should get into the Hall of Fame out of who's eligible?
Right, and who's
eligible? And the conversation, I think a good conversation to have for me would be, I would love to talk about Cam Chancellor is coming up for eligibility for the Hall of Fame in 2023.
Who else would be in that class is always my question. And who it would be, right? We got to wait till that year. And that's kind of where my head's at.
But like in my mind, I personally believe Cam Chancellor is a certifiable first-round Hall of Famer.
Most of the Legion of Boom should get in, and then this is the same argument with Julian. It's like the same thing. It's like, but again, who else will be there at that time? But Shane, what are your thoughts on this piece?
I don't think it's a similar argument there, though.
It's not entirely similar.
I think Cam Chancellor, as an all-around package, he is not a conversation.
I think
he will get in the, like, what is it, 8-year time period they have or something?
I believe it's 8 years. Yeah.
He'll get in eventually.
He'll get in on that. If not,
his resume speaks for itself.
Though. If nothing else, he'll probably get in the first 3 tries. But would you give that same benefit of the doubt to Edelman is kind of the question.
No, if Edelman, for me, I think Edelman should get in. I think it'll take him probably towards the end of his time for getting in. I think he's going to be, you know what it's going to be similar to? It's going to be a similar conversation, I believe, to what people had with in the MLB when they were talking about
no one got into the Baseball Hall of Fame last year.
No, I'm thinking about the Mariners Edgar.
Yeah.
When
Martinez?
People were talking about Edgar because of the fact that he was a DH.
Yeah.
Which to me the whole time it should not have been a conversation. I mean, he invented the damn position. Like,
Let me really quickly preface this about all these Hall of Fames. Again, basketball Hall of Fame is probably the easiest.
Oh yeah, everybody gets.
Yeah, everyone gets in. And then let's see. I don't know much about the Hockey Hall of Fame. Is that fairly easy, Brandon?
Hockey Hall of Fame is harder than basketball, but it's still pretty,
NFL or pro football's hard.
And MLB is the hardest.
And MLB is impossible and shouldn't even exist. Thank you.
Yeah, MLB just has a stupid bar for getting in.
Yeah, because of Babe Ruth not having perfect vote. Yet we voted Steph Curry to be perfect in the NBA. Anyway, or not perfect for the MVP, but we're probably going to vote him to maybe be perfect in the Hall of Fame. There's probably a lot of perfect guys that get in the Hall of Fame in basketball. Who knows? But the comparison's bizarre between the MVP and the Hall of Fame. But either way, Shane, your overall thoughts on how the different leagues approach the Hall of Fame process and how different all of it is?
I mean, I think it's definitely part of it has to do with the fact that there are so many less basketball players because it's only a team of 12, 15 guys as opposed to 50 on a football team.
53.
Right. So I think that's definitely part of it. Yeah, it is. I do think it is. It is strange how teams determine, or not how leagues determine who or like what qualifies a Hall of Famer, because it's easy to see that it seems to be kind of different from league to league.
It's incredibly subjective.
Right. I mean, I wish there was more of a. I don't know how you do this, but I wish there was more of a objective way of looking at it. Because like, for instance, you talk about playoff success, Super Bowls, whatever for NFL. So then what about a guy like Calvin Johnson? Where he didn't really ever even go to the playoffs, so that right there gets rid of half of his credentials for the Hall. You know what I mean?
But then you make a weird argument to say, or not a weird argument, but then your counter argument would always be he was on the flippin' Detroit Lions.
Right.
And he was the most dominant receiver either way of our generation. Like that was our generation, was Calvin Johnson.
Yeah.
But that you are correct in that you are eliminating the playoff success. You're making a caveat, unfair or fair, whatever you want to say, that probably doesn't need to be there.
I think the moral of the story, at least in my opinion, is that it's becoming more and more, at least it seems to me, that the Hall in really any sport just doesn't, it's not that it doesn't matter, but people don't care about it as much anymore. I mean, it still is probably important to players, but I mean, to fans and to, the fans' overall thoughts and legacy of a player, even if Edelman doesn't get in, I mean, we know what he did. You know what I mean? We don't need the Hall to tell us that he was a great player.
And I think that's the thing, that the Hall of Fame is all about remembrance, right? The Hall of Fame is all about, oh, here's this guy and here's what he did, right? Taking your little kid to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But honestly, these days now, even if Edelman doesn't get in, we're gonna be like, oh, Edelman made this catch in the Super Bowl. He's the MVP with Brady. He's part of that Patriots dynasty, a significant part. We don't need the Hall of Fame to remember that piece. We just know that. And let's be honest, either way, for Edelman, in terms of legacy, he's going to be in the Patriots Ring of Honor. So there's that too.
Yeah.
Brandon, do you have anything else to add before we conclude this piece of the conversation?
Don't think so.
Yeah. I think we pretty much covered that piece. And then let's move on to LaMarcus Aldridge. He unfortunately retired unexpectedly due to an irregular heartbeat. I believe that he had on April 10th during a game. It significantly got worse. And then he announced, I believe the other day, or what was it? yesterday, I believe. Yeah, that he announced his retirement from the game of basketball, taking care of his health and family. So props to him for that, and props to him for a great career. Man, LaMarcus Aldridge, I think will always be underrated, just because his play style wasn't the most flashiest thing in the world. I mean, it made sense. He went to the Spurs, right? But he was amazing in Portland in that part of his career, and then in Brooklyn there wasn't much. But I always remember him as a Blazer first. That's just how I always think of him. I think of young Aldridge and the way he played with Portland, especially with Lillard, as Lillard was continuing to grow up a bit. I won't remember the Spurs years as much. They didn't seem as valuable, but definitely the Blazers years. Brandon, do you have any thoughts on LaMarcus?
I mean, he was a good player, but he like I think he's always kind of been overshadowed by other players that he's played with.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he was with the when he started out with the Trailblazers, he was not the big star, and then he went to the Spurs and he wasn't the big star.
Yeah.
And then he was going to the Nets and he wasn't going to be the big star.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm sure, like as you said, I'm sure he'll get in the Hall of Fame because I think if you're somebody who's played a long time and you've put up decent numbers and
you've been a star, it's really, have you been a star in the league, a significant enough star in the league,
right,
to make that's
like,
not even a conversation.
It's like, have you made an impact consistently?
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, apparently this is something
all-star games, I would imagine.
Apparently this is something that he has been dealing with his whole career. He went to the hospital at the end of his rookie season in Portland with shortness of breath. He hasn't really said anything about what popped up to cause him to decide to call it short, but I guess 15 years isn't really that short. But
yeah, no, it's not. So this is what's going to be on his Hall of Fame resume: 7-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA, and an All-Rookie team. That's what's going to highlight his resume.
But no ring.
Yep. Well, that, again, basketball Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he shouldn't have a problem, I don't think. I mean, he was because he played mostly power forward, but
yeah.
he was also center too. I mean, yeah.
I look at him more as a power forward more than anything else. Not that matters in today's NBA, but
because he was always a very, like you said, he was never the flashy guy, but he was always the good supporter, team player. I mean, he'd get a fair amount of, he averaged, I think, 20 points a game his whole career, which is good. He just, he showed up, helped out his team. And, I mean, while he didn't have any rings, he certainly, he did have success, I would say. I mean, highlighted by the all-pro teams and whatnot. So,
yeah. What's interesting about LaMarcus's career, I think, is that transition from Portland to San Antonio. Portland and San Antonio both fit him in his career. But I remember when he signed with San Antonio, and that was one of the big signings of that free agent class, probably the biggest, he went to San Antonio to win a title. At the tail end of Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and then Kawhi coming up, he went there to win a title. And unfortunately, that didn't happen, and he probably could have won a title this year. Who knows? But he went to San Antonio to win a title, but he just wasn't able to get there because San Antonio was just getting older. He went there at a time.
Was on the rise.
Right, Golden State was on the rise, Cleveland. So that was kind of the main thing there. But either way, I still think a pretty awesome career, especially if you're a Blazers fan or a Spurs fan. You'll remember him even more fondly than most of us. So Still a great career. All right, let's move on to the NFL off-season news this week. Voluntary workouts have been a point of contention for the NFL and the NFLPA over the last 2 weeks due to COVID concerns, as expected, I would imagine. A lot of teams themselves, not necessarily just players, but teams have decided to skip the workouts as a whole due to those safety concerns. Mostly the players and the PA did start this movement, though. I think it's like 4 or 5 teams, including the Seahawks, the Steelers, the Falcons just announced a few moments ago that they are not going to be in in-person workouts. The Lions and the Buccaneers and the Broncos as well. I assume this list will continue to grow. I guess the primary conversation that we should have with this is, are voluntary workouts even important for these players, especially at this point of the year when it's, April 16th? Does it matter anymore that voluntary workouts even exist? Should we even have them? I guess my question doesn't really matter because my answer is no. And I think last year showed that with no preseason and no OTAs and stuff.
I think this once again, and Shane, you might be able to you might have a similar position as I do. I think this once again, Robert, shows that you don't have the experience of being on a sports team.
Probably.
In high school.
Probably.
But workouts are not really about getting swole or getting
fit.
Or because most people who are serious about the sport they play, whether it be college, high school, or whatever, pros, are always working out in some way. They're staying fit. The workouts are usually about getting team camaraderie and getting together and figuring out how your team's going to fit together. And usually OTAs, they're not usually for the veterans. And this is where I'm getting a little pissed off with the veterans. I think the veterans are being kind of shitty. They're taking away opportunities for the rookies, the young players, the players who need that time to connect with the older players. They're being like, nah, we're not going to do it. And yet then they're just going to go hang out at Russell's house, which is like, how is that? It's like, how is that any safer than
playing football?
No, playing at the Seahawks facility, which, by the way, is basically Fort Knox when it comes to keeping COVID out.
And also this year, especially, they literally have vaccines there. They literally have amazing tests, but they now have vaccines there. So if players want to get vaccinated during workouts, they can. You'll see that happen a lot in training camp.
Which is also going to be very interesting to see what happens there, because the league is being very interesting, but they're also being very smart about it. They're not saying we're going to force you to get vaccinated. We're just saying if you want life to be a lot easier for you, you should get vaccinated.
There you go.
Because those who want to be part of the first tier should get vaccinated, because they're basically saying if you get vaccinated, you can skip all that
quarantine. This is every league, by the way. This is not just the NFL. All the leagues.
They're like, you get vaccinated, you can skip all the quarantining, all the scanning, all the testing.
You just have to wear your mask. You just have to wear your mask.
You just have to wear your mask. And but the smart thing is, they're not saying you have to get it. They're saying you can get it, and here's the reward for getting it.
On top of that, I think it's very awesome that the leagues are like, hey, you don't need to go to your local pharmacy. You can literally do it at your freaking facility. Right. You can come in to work in the morning and get it.
But yeah, going back to the voluntary workouts, I'm not so bothered by that, right? It's fine. It's whatever. Okay, if they don't want to do that. Where I'm going to get a little bothered is the next phase. If you start having, come time for mandatory training camp or mandatory training, if you have teams being like, "Nah, we're not doing this," like,
I don't think it's necessarily training camp, but I think what's going to happen and what has already happened, and I think we've seen this with the injury concerns last year. We've seen it with offensive lines for decades. There's been so many stuff with how the offensive lines have been worse because of how the workouts have changed in recent decades. I think what's going to happen is that training camp and all this stuff is going to change where it's a lot more. I don't know if that's exactly going to be it, but it's going to feel more like a walkthrough than anything else. I don't know
well, I mean,
exactly because I don't think training camp is where the problem is.
well,
I
they
think training camp is
need
going to be
training
training
camp,
camp.
Robert.
Right,
Robert,
of
they
course.
need training.
Right.
Well, they need the OTAs. They need the OTAs. They need the voluntary training camp. They need all this stuff because, as we saw last year, we all saw it. We all saw what happened. We saw the 8 different MCLs happen in the first
Joe Burrow's ACL, in the middle.
we had 8 different players in the first 2 weeks basically go down with
more.
MCL.
We've had more stuff too.
All the
That was a lot.
ACL, MCL, knee, all this stuff in the first couple weeks, and it's like, I wonder why. Maybe it's because their bodies weren't prepared
for all-out physicality,
for
right
all that
away.
physicality, for the stopping and starting, for the movement, and I think also part of it is because they weren't getting in there with the trainers who can stretch you out and all that stuff. And I said this last year. I made the same point last year when players weren't able to get in there. And I remember you being like, "Oh, it's not going to be that big of a deal."
And then we realized it was
a big deal. And I'll be honest, I'll be the first one to say, yes, I gloated a little bit because I knew exactly what was going to happen. I've always been a big proponent that you need to keep training camps. You need the 3 preseason games. You need to get players out there and getting the.
Yeah, we're gonna have 3 this year. Yep.
And fine, do 3, but at least have some. It terrifies me, honestly, putting the best players out in the field without them having the opportunity to get their bodies warm.
Now here's a separate question, though. I mean, this is obviously not exactly valid at all, just because it's an individual team and it's an individual case study compared to the wider sense of the league. But look at teams like the Titans, for instance, who had weeks of absences. And they came out and won and didn't have any injuries. But again, that's not the most perfect argument because it's just one particular case study versus the entire statistic of the league that we saw through the first 11 weeks and even more. So, although I would say that some people could make that argument, but it's really not the best argument in the world.
Well, the Titans, also, as we saw, the Titans were still getting out there and practicing and hitting.
Yeah. Even though they weren't, and they were in an outbreak, but whatever.
Ironically, they were getting more opportunity to tackle and stuff because they were not in a sanctioned practice.
Well, they got fined. Anyway, Shane, your thoughts on skipping voluntary workouts and what that means for the PA, for the league, and for injuries?
Yeah, I think, Brannan, I kind of agree with him that, the biggest thing that you miss out with it is just, the team not being able to bond and, get to know each other and, get chemistry, whatever. But yeah, I mean, if you start missing OTAs, training camp, preseason, whatever, then I have a problem because in addition to the injuries, I mean, look at the offensive line play last year, for instance, was terrible. And, a big reason why is because, you need all these practices for these guys to connect and to get better. And so as a result, the offensive line play that was already struggling
it's horrible. Just say it.
Even worse. So, that's just one example of the trickling effect it can have. And I mean, if like last year, if guys didn't want to do this kind of stuff, I would get it because, the virus was still
You
kind
didn't
of
even have
new.
it. The NFL was like, screw this. We don't have
Right,
the
right.
tools to be safe. Screw it.
That's one thing.
But this is different because they actually have tools now and they're very prepared.
Yeah, I mean, we played a 16-game season last year, and the teams that actually follow the rules were just fine. And
Every team
now,
had their issues, though. Let's not get it
right.
twisted.
And so now, not only do you have all the testing and whatever else they have, but you also have vaccines now. Imagine that. So like,
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, the excuses, the COVID excuse to me is not as valid anymore because of everything that we have now for it. So yeah,
You have ample opportunity to be safe, particularly in an environment like the NFL, where there's also a lot more public pressure to be safe as well.
right. That's
As
true,
well as
actually.
health and safety pressure, which is why these leagues are very cautious, or at least trying to be cautious. Not that the NFL was perfectly cautious and probably won't be this year anyway. They just aren't and haven't been, same with the NBA. But there is public pressure for the games to go on as scheduled. There is public pressure to also just keep these players safe because guess what? Even from the PA perspective, because guess what? They're the ones on the field. We can't have what we had with Kendall Hilton last year happen again this year. We just can't have that. The product isn't the same, but it's also just not fun for the players.
Yeah.
Okay, Shane. So we're talking about Mac Jones last week. That was a great sort of overview of our quarterback, of the quarterbacks in this draft class. But you have a differing opinion on Mac Jones in terms of the San Francisco work for him. This coming after the Justin Fields Pro Day, which now puts Justin Fields firmly in that conversation as well for the third overall pick. So first, why does Mac Jones fit in San Francisco for you? What changed after a week?
Okay, so I'll say this. I still don't I'm still not too high on him yet. That could change. But I'm just going to say I'm still not too high on Mac Jones. However, I thought about it for San Francisco's case, and it makes perfect sense why they would want him. Okay, think about this. They have who has Kyle Shanahan been successful with? Jimmy Garoppolo, Matt Ryan, another guy that he really liked, Kirk Cousins.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say Kurt.
What do those guys have in common? They're pocket passers. They're ball distributors, right? Kyle Shanahan has this great system. He doesn't want, some guy like Zach Wilson who's, quote, chaotic or whatever.
Chaotic?
That's what people are saying. They're like, he thrives in chaos. He's like, he doesn't care about that, okay? He just wants a guy who's just going to sit nice and comfy in the pocket and get the ball around. That's what he's done with, the successful quarterbacks. And that's exactly what Mac Jones does. You know what I mean? Granted, I think he was, like I said, Mac Jones was enhanced by, a good offensive line and by good receivers, whatever. I don't think he's quite going to have that level of support in San Francisco. Well, I mean, they're pro receivers, so they're obviously better, but relative
the talent at their receiver position
Well,
is
I mean,
not that good.
relative to the rest
actually,
of the league,
Shane, like that, you can't say that they're obviously better because, like, he essentially, like, Mac Jones
had like 2 first-round picks.
Yeah, he had 2 first-round picks at wide receiver. He had the best running back in the draft at running back. He
potential first-round picks. They will be first-round picks.
He had best running back in the draft, 2 of the best wide receivers in the draft, a good tight end, a really good O-line. I mean, this man,
what I mean
I
is,
think he's gonna be all that great in the like he's up here for a lot of people because of what he had in front of him.
That's what I mean. Yeah, and when I say that he when I say that the San Francisco receivers are better than the receivers he had at Alabama, I only say that because they're already in the pros. You know
For
what
like
I mean?
3 years
Okay.
plus.
But that could very well change, obviously, because I mean they're expected to go, potentially top 10.
Yeah.
So,
Shane, can you say that list again of Kyle Shanahan quarterbacks?
Matt Ryan, Jimmy
Okay.
Garoppolo, and Kirk Cousins.
Okay. This is why Kyle Shanahan doesn't win Super Bowls. This is why. Like,
Here's the thing. I'm not saying I agree with him. I'm just saying
It's his MO.
I'm thinking from his perspective. What does
Yeah.
he
right,
think?
but okay.
Yeah.
This is probably what he thinks.
Look,
You know what I mean?
minus Matt Ryan because he made a Super Bowl with him, and I think Matt Ryan's pretty good. Minus Matt Ryan, I guess Jimmy Garoppolo made a Super Bowl, but I like Matt Ryan a lot.
Matt Ryan is over the hill.
I know.
I think Matt Ryan's very underrated.
I think he's very underrated as well. So minus that, but let's do Jimmy Garoppolo. Let's do Kirk Cousins. They're basically game managers. If you want to be harsh. If you want to be harsh, that's what you would say.
Yeah.
So why, if you're the Niners, why would you want another one in Mac Jones? Because that's what you're appearing to get.
Because they're dumb.
Like over Justin Fields, where you can actually have more dimensions to your offense, a more athletic quarterback.
No, and I agree. I'm just saying this is because I tried to rationale why they would want Mac Jones instead. I thought about it and I was like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense for them.
You know what the real reason is?
But,
that Shanahans don't take black quarterbacks.
Is that a historically based thing?
Look at it. Both Shanahans they don't take black. I'm pretty certain that his father never had a black quarterback.
I imagine he had one or two, but I would have to search it up. I don't know.
It's like, I mean, I'm only sort of joking, but like the reason I say that is because that's just generally the reason why Justin Fields is probably not going to go third, because like people
that's the point
in
you
the
made
back of their
last
mind.
week,
Yeah, and I'll keep making the point because it's
My whole thing is I think Shane, you're right, but like then it makes me go like, okay, they're just getting Mac Jones to be a game manager, and you might refute me on this, but I'm telling you that organization fully believes it. They believe they're Super Bowl contender right now, regardless of how we feel about the Niners. That's what they think right now.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what you think right now, I don't think Mac Jones is going to get you there because let's be real. They think that, but this window is closing, man. It's closing faster than the speed of light. This is maybe 2 more years left, particularly with this division and how much better this division is going to get between all 4 of these teams. Maybe the window's already closed, but let's say, for instance, it's open. It is closing fast. That's why it's so hard to have a rookie quarterback when you're trying to win a Super Bowl. But Mac Jones ain't going to get you there in 2 years. He just ain't.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I said, I'm just trying to think from their point of view.
Right, and I think you're right.
Would,
I think you're right. But then let me ask you this question. Obviously there wasn't much tape of Justin Fields' pro day, but clearly now there is real conversations being had, I would imagine, within the organization about Justin Fields.
Yeah.
Why do you think Kyle Shanahan would stray away from a guy like Mac Jones, which is more his style, to a Justin Fields? Where's that argument to be made in his offices this week that Fields should be that pick in your mind, Shane? What's that argument you think in that facility this week?
I would say just that he is a more dimensional player, and that he, because Mac Jones, while he has a good arm and a good football IQ, I think he's a bit limited. I mean, as an athlete, that's I don't think anybody would really argue that, and so in today's game, it's becoming more and more important that your quarterback is mobile, right? I mean, the only really kind of successful pocket passer left in the game is Tom Brady, and he's 43 years old. So
And maybe Big Ben, but he's regressing anyway.
well, yeah, and I would say Matt Ryan, but I mean, he hasn't done. I mean, he himself has played well, but it's not like he's won anything or made significant, you know, strides in the game.
In the game these days, to be successful, you have to be able to be multidimensional as a quarterback. Like, you can't just survive as a pocket passer. It's changed so much from just to stand there and throw it to
right.
Because if you think about it, also during the pocket passer era, the O lines were also so much better.
Right.
Like they had bigger guys, got like consistently coming out of college. Just so every team basically had a pretty good O line.
It wasn't a real conversation a decade plus ago. Just wasn't the O-line conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, you just look at the best quarterbacks in the league today. Mahomes, Allen, Wilson.
Aaron Rodgers, doesn't he count as kind of more of a pocket
Rodgers,
passer?
I mean,
Rodgers, he's definitely a pocket passer.
Well, he used to be faster, and he used to run around more, but he doesn't.
He's a pocket passer now.
Yeah.
But with the pocket passer era, or with pocket passers now, I guess it stands to reason that you have to have a pretty good arm, because look at guys like Aaron Rodgers, look at guys like Matthew Stafford, for example.
Well, I would argue that you could make the argument that Russell's becoming sort of a pocket passer.
I think you all have to become a pocket passer later on in your career, but you still have to have some level of mobility.
I mean, he's a pocket passer. He's a pocket passer who shows he can still run it when he needs to.
And that's what the quarterbacks are going to be. You come into your career and you're a runner. And then in year 5, if you don't change, in year 3 to 5, if you don't change, you're going to get screwed. Look at Lamar and look at our conversations.
Russell's honestly kind of written the book as a runner on how to keep your career, extend your career after year 5. Like he hit year 5 and he had that 2-year period where he wasn't being as successful because he kept trying to run it when, he wasn't as fast anymore. And then he changed it up and became a pocket passer, and boom, now look at his stats. I mean, we'll see what happens this year, and I'm hoping it with the changing of his, instead of just throwing it deep all the time, maybe he'll change that up. But
and improve the line.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I was wrong about the Shanahan's not drafting black quarterbacks. Mike Shanahan drafted RGB or
RG3.
RG3. Yeah.
This is basically the RG3 trade repeated.
Yeah,
Shane, you and I talked about this. This is basically the same flipping trade.
Or the Trubisky.
Bears. Or the Trubisky trade. It's like the same.
Yeah. It's like trading up and they were going to take the wrong guy.
Hopefully it's not the wrong guy. We'll see.
Well, as a Seahawks
I want it to be the wrong guy.
You want it to be the wrong guy.
Please take.
But for San Francisco,
Mac Jones.
You hope it's not. No offense to any Niner fans out there, of course. But
speaking of quarterbacks, the Washington football team GM says they're very confident and comfortable with their roster. They were linked to Trey Lance last week. But the GM basically said anyone with limited time at the quarterback position in college is someone we're not that interested in.
Ooh, Brandon, shots fired.
Brandon, this means that your guy, Ryan Fitzpatrick, is looking more and more likely to be the full-time starter in Washington.
At what, 38?
Maybe I'll have to get myself a Fitzpatrick Washington jersey.
That'd be so funny.
Do it. You won't.
Oh man, you want to bet?
No.
I'll get the jersey and your money.
Doubt it.
No, I don't know. I think honestly, I think last year he kind of proved a lot of people wrong. Like a lot of haters were like, he's old, he's washed up, he can't do it anymore. Well, guess what? The Fitz magic never dies.
It dies after 6 games.
Not last year.
Yeah, because it was spread out because Tua played the first half.
Yeah, and Tua was so trash that it made everybody realize that Fitzmagic is the best. I know he is. If someone said, "Do you know the way?" I would say, "Yes, it's Fitzmagic."
Is he still the 7th best quarterback in the NFL though?
Yes.
Did you draft him 7? Yeah, you did.
Yeah,
I did.
When we do this, we're gonna do this draft again. If he gets drafted in the top 10 again, when we do this in the summer.
I took Josh Allen at 11, and everybody said I was on crack.
You kind of are still on crack.
I took Kyler Murray in the top 10.
Josh Allen.
Yeah, you were definitely on crack, Robert.
Josh Allen was a top 5 quarterback last year.
Yeah, but it's a 1-season thing.
So
I'm gonna need him to do it again.
Kyler, you mean?
No, Josh Allen.
Josh Allen.
Oh no, he'll be fine.
Kyler is not a top 5 quarterback.
He'll get there.
I still have
Kyler belief. It exists.
How can you believe in Kyler?
I believe.
You know what, Robert? I'm not gonna do what Shane does to me with my love of Fitzpatrick. I'm gonna support your belief in Kyler Murray, and we can together have our irrational love for a quarterback.
That and Cliff Kingsbury's house.
Okay, he does have a pretty sick house.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That view he had when he was drafting. Ooh.
It's like all those memes I saw where it was like Bill Belichick wins 6 Super Bowls, and then it shows him in his like very plain dining room.
House.
No, his dog won 6 rings. What are you talking about?
Yeah, his dog. It's like
too.
I saw one meme that was like wins 6 Super Bowls, turns into a dog during the draft.
His dog's name is Nike, isn't it?
Well, no, it was funny because it's like, this is what happens when you win 6 Super Bowls, and it shows his plain dining room, and then it says, but if you win only 5 games, then it shows Cliff Kingsbury in his nice setup. Yeah.
We do have some, I guess, semi-breaking news here. So the Ravens proposed, I don't know if they're doing, when are they doing the actual owners meetings? It's like a few weeks or something, or do they already have it? I don't remember. I think they're having it later on. Anyway, so the Ravens had a proposal about the sky judge. So the sky judge, the booth judge, basically, right? Like the camera judge in the booth. And they withdrew that just now and said, we don't want to do that. I think this is probably going to happen. So in-game official in the press box during games is basically what the sky judge is. I think there's also some camera-based involved as well. But in-game official in the press box, the Ravens have withdrew that proposal. This is something that I think the NFL actually needs, and it will happen eventually. But what are your guys' thoughts on the sky judge?
I didn't know this was being considered, actually. This is news to me. Okay, I gotta ask, what's the reasoning or the motivation to ban it?
Wait, to not have it?
Or to not have it, whatever.
I don't know. They just repealed it, so I don't have many information. Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network just announced this 15 minutes ago that they're refuting it. I don't know why. I think partially it's because I think the NFL and the owners are in general very hesitant to make so-called drastic changes. In years we've talked about the onside kick as well being changed, and I think that's also being proposed in these owners meetings as well. But so this is like the competition committee. Wait, so let's see. Let me read through this a bit more. So they withdrew the proposal, but the competition committee's proposal for expanded booth to official communication with video has strong support. So that will pass. That makes sense. But like in terms of the sky judge, I think that's sort of like a substitute and a smaller thing with the booth to official communication with that video stuff. But I think the motivation to have it actually makes more sense just because you have someone with a wider view from the press box, someone who's very much connected to the TV broadcast, if you will. I think that's beneficial. But again, we also turn to a conversation like we're having in the NBA in recent years, which is too much replay is tiring and we don't need it. And that's maybe partially why it was refuted as well. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Yeah, I mean I mean, too much replay, being tiring, whatever. Yeah, like I get it, but I mean at the same time, like you want the game to be fair, right? So I mean, I don't know. Like I feel like if that's what it, if you feel like you have to do that in order for the game to not feel skewed or something like that, or whatever. I mean, then I get it, but um, I don't know. I mean, it's not. At least they're not like getting rid of um, the pylon cam or something.
Yeah. Brandon, your thoughts on the Ravens withdrawing the sky judge?
I mean, I don't know how I feel about the sky judge. It could be interesting, but was the point of it to see a broader view of plays? Because I could see it being good for like pass interference plays,
Right.
to be able to see, to like kind of have a view above the play where the ball's coming down. If like especially because of the fact that up until now, like you still don't have a way of seeing if it's actually the defender grabbing the offensive player, or if it's the offensive player actively pushing away the defensive player, because like there's only so much the offensive player actually legally can do to stop, like, so I would have kind of been in favor for the sky judge, but I don't know.
This also brings to me another thing that I don't think we talked about too much during the season, but I noticed, I mean, I watched we all did basically like every game last year. One thing that was very apparent to me, and I don't know if this was a competition committee thing, I don't know if this was a league-based thing, but there were a lot more offensive PIs than expected. And I wonder if that's, as Brandon brought up, like the offensive defensive player thing, I wonder if that's to combat some of the more aggressive and egregious defensive PIs, because a lot of the offensive PIs weren't that egregious, but they did exist more often this year than in past years. So I wonder if that was some more of a focus or something I just noticed from watching the games last year.
Yeah, it could be, because I mean, it seemed like defense was getting penalized on every single play. So
Yeah.
15-yard penalty. The defender looked in the direction of Jimmy Garoppolo and gave him a nasty look.
He looked at Jimmy Garoppolo and licked his lips.
I guess this also brings up another conversation about the replay issues in the NBA, since we're talking about replay in general with sports. In the NBA right now, the last minute of games take 20 minutes, and it's super annoying.
Oh my god! Well, not even because of the replay, but also just timeouts and whatever.
So Shane, this frustrates you a lot, doesn't it?
A little bit, especially like in March Madness, where I'm trying to, get on to the next game, and they're
fouling away.
Yeah, like I forget what game it was, but I looked at the clock, and the last minute of the game, I'm not even joking, was 11 minutes. Because they're like, oh, we gotta check this replay 60 times just to make sure it was really legit. It's like, what? And then every clock would go by for 2 seconds. They pass the ball, timeout, and it's like, And then it was finally over, and then I went and turned on the other game, and it was already halftime. So it was.
You got a little break.
No, not actually, but
Yeah. No,
might as well have been.
Yeah, Ryan was still talking about this with Bill Simmons a couple of weeks ago, and this is sort of what brought up our discussion on it as well in recent weeks to have this discussion on the show. And we just completely forgot about it. But Ryan said, like, if there was an alien that came down from space and you taught them basketball and you told them that it's really fast paced for 2.5 hours, and the last minute of the game takes 20 minutes of those 2.5 hours, what do you think the alien's reaction would be?
It would malfunction.
Or something like that. And I was like, this is hilarious. Brandon, your thoughts on like the last minute of basketball games these days?
It just takes forever.
It's annoying.
Like, yeah, it's annoying, and it's dumb that they could just keep fouling. Like, it's especially annoying when the team that keeps fouling knows they're gonna lose. You know?
Yeah.
Like,
they're just trying for a miracle.
It'd be like if the last in the giant climactic third act battle of a movie, right? If like it's the heart pumping action, it's really intense, it's been a great film, and then you get to the end and they like throw a few punches and they're like, hold on. All right, let's just talk it out.
They talk about it for 15 minutes.
Okay, let's fight again. Like, imagine how stupid that would be. Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how we would fix it. I think partially it's the fouling. How do we fix fouling so we don't get guys to the line all the time? I think the main way to do this is to do that rule where you just have a certain point number that they have to reach in a last quarter, potentially like we see in the All-Star game. That could potentially be a fix.
Or if a player keeps fouling, just eject them from the game.
Yeah.
Individual. Well, I guess they already do that with 6 fouls or 5, but yeah. I think that's kind of I think the only way that they would do that is to like fix it where you would have like the All-Star game pointage in the fourth quarter, but I don't even think that's a great idea necessarily. I'm not sure. It is an intriguing idea, but I don't think it's perfect necessarily. At least not yet. I think we still need to test that out. But that's like the first thing that comes to mind. I'm sure there are other ones, but not too sure at this moment. Still, it's a stupid thing. We'll have to see how we fix it. I think it's something that should be discussed with the NBA owners in the summertime. I think they will discuss it at some level, but we'll see. Before we get to more NBA stuff, the Seahawks signed Aldon Smith. What are your guys' thoughts on this signing?
I like it.
I'm on the fence.
Brandon, you go first. Why do you like it?
I don't think there's any so look, we signed him for 1 year, and it's not like an unusually large amount of money, and I think the Seahawks have a history of bringing in guys who possibly have had rough times in other teams and kind of showed them the way, molded them into really good players. I mean, Aldon Smith, when he was actually not being a crazy person, has shown that he can be a really good player. So if he can, we just added major depth to our defense.
Shane, he had a good first half of the year with Dallas, and he kind of tapered off, but that first half was still pretty impressive. Why are you on the fence about it? Because I'm kind of with you. I don't really see the whole way through with this move. I think Brandon's right. It's kind of just a depth move, but what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, I think he's like Brennan said, if you can get him, if you can find the good player in him like he once was, which they kind of did like with a guy like Dunlap, right? Then that's that's great, because like in in 2013, for instance, he led the league in sacks, I'm pretty sure,
Mhm.
which is just an example of the kind of guy he can be. Granted, that was a while ago, and he hasn't
He's
played.
31 now.
He hasn't well, and he hasn't played a lot since then. Um, but I mean, another thing that concerns me is that he's had a lot of legal troubles. I mean, the guy's been arrested like what 11 times or something.
Those, I'll be honest, those stories are the airport one, which I'm not gonna say, is legendary in a really bad way, but it is legendary for the amount of stupidity it actually was. But that story is legendary. He has cleaned himself up though. I mean, Dallas gave him a shot, and Dallas has a historical piece of giving guys shots that just don't work out.
Yeah.
But Alden, I mean, they did a piece on him for the Thanksgiving game. Fox did, I believe, with Tom Rinaldi, and it was a really interesting piece to see sort of this guy kind of come back and be like, have this fire to sort of come back. It was different in Dallas, where it's a place where a lot of these guys that want to come back are still a bit bratty and all this stuff because it's Dallas. But Alden really wasn't like that. I don't think that the legal troubles are going to affect him much, and he really just wants to make the most of the amount of time he has left in his career because there's not much time left, and he wasted about 6 years of it from those legal troubles.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably not a huge problem. It's just something in the back of my mind.
Right.
But yeah, no, I mean, at the very least, it does add depth, which is nice. Um, Now they just need a corner or two, maybe three. And it'll be
Yeah.
fine, It'll be great. But
Yep. We're going to have an interesting conversation now going to the NBA, and we're finishing some of our NBA conversations with this rash of injuries that we've seen with the league. Jamal Murray this past week with that terrible ACL tear to finish his season, potentially most of next season as well. NBA personnel, particularly GMs, have talked about this with ESPN's Baxter Holmes about we've defaulted to survival mode with the compressed schedule with COVID. There's also been a great great burden on the players and even the ownership and the GMs with mental health as well, which I do want to discuss. But one veteran assistant coach says, hands down, it's the worst schedule I've seen in 25 years. It's insane. One veteran head coach called it brutal. Says far worse than the bubble because the bubble didn't have any travel. Never experienced this amount of injuries. According to the Sports Bureau, the All-Stars of this year missed 15% of games this season, on pace to be the second highest rate in NBA history. The only season higher was the 14 to 15. Every dumb soft tissue injury that can happen is happening and will get worse. So those are just some examples. And then I also wanted to bring in some of the mental health aspects of this season, which are all going through with COVID, of course. But that has certainly been a concern across the league in recent years with Adam Silver and Jaylen Brown having that conference about players' mental health and how it's been in a really bad state. And this year it's definitely gone exponentially worse, not only for NBA players, but across many other leagues as well. And of course, with all of us with COVID over the past year. So I think that's important to acknowledge as well. But what are your guys' thoughts on the GMs and this discussion about mental and physical health for players, not only in the NBA, but in other leagues as well this season?
I think it's important to think about it because a lot of us, myself included, I look at sports and professional athletes and whatever, and we always think about how's their physical health, because that's the name of the game. It's sports, right? But there is that's only half of your health. There's also mental health, and it's called health for a reason. And so I think it's important that we don't just kind of brush that off, but that we do look at it and consider it and go, okay, well, how might the players be affected by all this, just like anybody else is? Because yes, they might be wealthy and aren't struggling to put food on their table and have a roof over their head, but they still, they're still dealing with the isolation like everybody else, and just just a lot of people having an overall fear of the virus, which is understandable. So, I think in recent years, it's become something that is not as, I don't want to say shameful, but it's it seemed like before there was this big stigma around mental health, that it was, like people thought that they were weak if they spoke up about it and said, I'm just not feeling right in the head. uh, but now I think it's, especially in the last year, I think a lot of people have seen the importance of seeing therapists. And um, as somebody like myself who I you know I wouldn't consider myself mentally ill, but I talk to a therapist once a week or once every other week. I think everybody should do that. It's just great because there's so much in this world that is like a burden to us, especially with the pandemic and all this stuff, that I think it's really important that we all keep up with our well-being mentally. Um, Went on a bit of a tangent there, but
Mhm.
it's all the point still stands. It's all it is all important. All the health for them. Um,
And Shane, to sort of finish off your point before I go to Brandon, I think the most important thing, we're talking about the NBA players and this conversation and the NBA players, and we're talking about travel as well and how that's been affecting them, because travel can really affect you. But that correlation between mental health and physical health is something that I think is partially causing these injuries as well. I don't think it's fully, but that correlation I think still exists at some level here as well.
yeah, I absolutely believe it does. I mean, it's because at least in my opinion, how I think of it is like if you are, if you're depressed or anxious or whatever it might be, you're gonna, I think you're more vulnerable to injury personally, because you're not thinking like, oh, what can I do to prevent injury, or you're not focusing on just being healthy and all this stuff because you're worried about other things.
Mhm.
Yeah, right. So um, I don't know. I could be wrong, but that's how I look at it, anyways.
Brandon, I'll have you sort of continue that conversation by talking about these mental, physical health pieces, but also I know with the NHL, with the Canucks not going back to play for health concerns as well right now, and then also the schedule too, because we finished the bubble in October and we started back again in December, so how that affects teams as well. But go ahead with your thoughts on this overall, adding that NHL piece as well.
Well, I personally don't think a lot of these injuries are mental. I think the way that the players are dealing with it is mental.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the players are being very snappy and being very, frankly, dickish. Like
Some are, not
they're
everybody, but some are.
I
Maybe.
mean, I can tell you that LeBron James is being a lot more curt in his interactions with the media than he usually is, and he's usually pretty curt in the way he interacts with the media. But I do believe it's not a surprise that it's not a shock to me that LeBron and AD went down with injuries after the Lakers were the team that ran the gambit and won the cup last year.
Right. And then look at the Heat as well. They've been struggling the whole year.
They've been struggling with injuries. I think the good news is that we'll get an actual off season this year. So that'll be good.
Yeah, I think that'll help as well. I think this will be the top of the agenda for the owners' meetings this year, to see how the schedule will change to better benefit the players with the 82 games as well. So I think That's
Well,
sort of
no,
a good
I
overview of
think
that.
they're still going to run an 82-game season.
No, they're going to
think.
run an 82-game season, but I wonder how they're going to structure it differently or how they're going to figure
They'll,
that
I
out.
bet they'll end up with a longer break in the middle.
Yeah, that could possibly be the case.
I mean, honestly, in my opinion, I believe the NBA should be, like the same season length that it normally is, but only 60 games. So that you're not doing this extraneous travel and constant gameplay and stress on your body. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, baseball plays 162, and I've always made the argument that's a lot. I feel like they should have moved to 82 a long time ago.
Well,
But
the problem with baseball, as we saw last year,
or even 120 for baseball.
Yeah, the problem with baseball is because of how the game works, you can't do anything less than 100.
yeah, it's like it's like
you have to have a
historical
large number to deal with in terms of wins, losses. Unlike basketball or football, where it's like such a I don't know, competitive, like long. I don't know how to explain it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the All-Star break. It's also, I think it's worth noting that the finals are in July.
Yeah.
This year. So the break is also once again smaller, depending on when the finals do end, because I believe it's July 1st or the 22nd or something.
Yeah, but the season didn't end last year till like what, August, September?
No, the season ended in late October.
Oh, that's right.
No, it was early October.
Or early October, whatever. I think
so. Okay,
happy medium mid-October.
This is right. We had this conversation last year, where we were like, this season will be off. Next season will have a shorter break, but it'll probably start up again in October at the usual start date for the season.
Well,
then the season after that they'll get back to a normal off season.
Right, but we thought, or at least the players thought, they would be going back to games in like mid-January, and they started around Christmas. I mean, it's 2 weeks, but it's still a pretty big difference. And the reason they did that is money, because like, oh, let's just start in Christmas, where we'd like to start. And then
one thing I'm wondering about is, how the hell are they going to get the finals in if you have players like LeBron who's still in the finals and yada yada yada? Are we even going to send NBA players to Japan
Olympics
for the Olympics?
No way. The answer is no way. The answer.
I forgot about that.
Those are going to be some shitty ass Olympics then for basketball. Because
do you? I mean, we're gonna see what happens with the virus in June, I guess, to see what's gonna happen with the Olympics. But this Olympics gonna be whack. It's literally gonna be whack.
It might be kind of cool to not have the U.S. in the basketball tournament for the Olympics.
I mean, they're in. I imagine they'll be in, but it's gonna be a bunch of like U20 guys.
I mean, here's the funny thing: they'll we're gonna send the U.S. basketball, and we're still gonna win because
maybe. I mean, Spain's not gonna send their big dogs. No
Spain won't send. Nobody from the NBA is gonna go and play. I guarantee you that. They're all just gonna be like, we're gonna go home and sleep.
Yeah, there's no reason for them to. Yeah. There's like no reason.
I don't think like no one, like Luka's not gonna go, and like
nobody's gonna go.
No one from. I just don't.
My question is, why would you after this mess?
Right.
Why the frick would you? You're going to get so hurt.
Like, there's sure as hell no reason that LeBron James is going to go play or AD because, like, especially after they're barely going to finish the season.
Do you guys remember
after coming back?
16? Do you guys? Sorry, Brandon, for interrupting. Do you guys remember in 16 in Rio, it was basically just like Clay and a bunch of other guys?
Yeah.
It wasn't that many people.
And they still won.
Yeah. Remember Clay, like halfway through the tournament, they're like, "Oh my God, Clay's struggling with the shot.
Yeah,
we're fricked."
And then Clay got hurt.
And then, just a sidebar, they also went to a brothel, which was funny. Accidentally.
Wait, really?
Went to a brothel in Rio. Yeah, that was really.
Oh yeah, accidentally.
No, it was accidental. It was like purely accidental. Jimmy Butler talked about it.
The Washington State University grad accidentally goes to a brothel in Brazil.
I don't think it was Clay. It was everyone else.
Sure. I
That's
totally
just a
believe
sidebar
that.
of how bizarre Rio was for a bunch of these athletes. They also stayed on a boat. If you guys
That's
don't
fun.
remember that. They
Yeah,
also,
that'd be fun.
I think it was because of like Zika concerns or whatever. They decided to stay
Wait,
on
they
a
stayed
boat.
on a boat?
Yeah.
Was it Jerry
Team
Jones'
USA?
yacht?
No, it was just like a huge boat on like a coast or whatever, and it was
That was
just
a
the
joke.
men's and women's players.
So wait, are you telling me that they basically had they shipped the players in to play their games and then were like,
No.
all right, back on the boat.
They just stayed. They all flew in and they just stayed on this boat instead of
Yo,
the Olympic
here's
Village.
a dope idea. Here would be a dope. What if in the future we get a giant like cruise ship? If there was a giant cruise ship or like a barge in the middle of the ocean and it had a basketball court set up on it and you had like an international
Like they do in the military with college basketball, like the military
yeah,
ships
but it's
playing games.
just like international waters basketball tournament. And it's like that would be the way to have a true
Water World basketball.
Yes, that would just have a true neutral site NBA championship series in
And
the
a
middle in
freaking boat.
international waters in a or you could have it off the coast of Miami or something, just like giant water cannons and everything.
Oh my god.
That'd be dope.
I love how bizarre these conversations get at times. Only have a couple
That's not
things.
bizarre. That's genius.
I know, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, it is a great idea though. So we have only a couple topics left. Next up is the NCAA will allow transfers for college football, one-time transfers without sitting out a season.
That's dumb.
For college football and college basketball. Now, keep in mind that they're already doing this technically.
I was going to say.
They already are doing this with a bunch of waivers, but now they're making it official. Does this hurt college football or college basketball at all moving forward? Because it basically creates a free agency.
It just allows, exactly. But it also just allows players to just jump from school to school. Also, that the coaches are going to be like, hey, come play for my school next year.
Fake recruit them.
You're going to have
recruit them.
You're going to have players on bad teams getting told to come play for us and just.
I failed to recruit you last year in high school, but how about we try again? Really?
Right.
Okay.
I think what this kind of is supposed to be is guys that flame out in top programs to go to a smaller D1.
I don't know.
That's the intention of it.
I think that's the intention, but everything with a good intention can be used poorly.
Yeah. Shane, your overall thoughts on this transfer rule that as I said, has already sort of existed with waivers.
I mean, the thing is, you already choose where you go to college, it's not like these guys are getting paid millions of dollars. That's a whole other conversation in itself. But, it's like if you want to transfer once because it's like a Jalen Hurts situation where you have two really good starters in the same program and you're like, well, I just want to go start elsewhere. So that I get. However, if it's going to be a type of thing where you go to a team and you're like, oh, these guys suck, I'm leaving. It's like, okay, fine, but it kind of you chose to go there. You know what I mean? So I would just say you should be, you should be loyal to them, unless
you're in a position where you're not going to start, you're not going to contribute,
or you're not going to succeed. I guess. I don't know.
This at some level is going to hurt college basketball and college football because the transfer portal is now becoming a bigger thing and a bigger conversation, and it has hurt it. I think it will hurt it even more. But especially with basketball, guys don't stay. Top flight guys that transfer won't stay around probably for more than 2 years if they're successful, like a guy like Johnny Juzang, So, I mean, it's not the spirit of college basketball really should be that these guys stay 3 years. I would prefer it. This goes to a wider conversation on college basketball. College football is a little bit different just because, I mean, I guess they also stay 3 years as well, right? But college basketball needs that same thing where it's like, okay, these are pure college athletes playing, not just NBA guys. I've always been the proponent of we need to bring back high school to the NBA. Like, let's have it where these guys stay a long time and maybe not transfer, maybe more loyal to the program because they're not so focused on the NBA prospects until towards the end of their time,
I guess unless they are, unless they feel they're ready for the NBA and they sitting there thinking, well, I don't really want to waste my precious time in the game at college, when I can be in the pros. I guess that makes sense, but I don't know.
Yeah. And then let's also go to the coach's side. Sean Miller got fired. I think as expected in Arizona, just because of the whole FBI probe. But what's more interesting is who they brought in, which is the former Gonzaga assistant Tommy Lloyd, who was very active in the program with Mark Few and building that program at Gonzaga. He has an opportunity to build this program in Arizona that has been decimated by Sean Miller. It's a really good hire. It's going to be interesting to see how long it takes, especially with, I guess, the Pac-12. This goes to that Pac-12 conversation of, hey, the Pac-12 is actually getting some really good coaches and a lot more talent as a whole. That a lot more recruits around the country are going to take notice of it. Brandon, do you have anything to add with that piece? Because I think Arizona being added to that mix is going to be super interesting.
I don't know. I mean, they were kind of bad this year.
Yeah.
Like,
they were fairly bad this year.
Yeah. So I really have nothing to say.
Yeah. I think Shane, do you have anything to add on that piece?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a neat hire, just getting a culture builder, hopefully kind of or at least that's what I assume the intention is there to sort of get them going on a better track, and which certainly seem like they might be capable of. So yeah.
So let's finish up today by talking about ownership changes across the NBA. First, we'll start with Dwayne Wade. It is funny to me, Dwayne Wade getting an ownership stake on the Utah Jazz side because, these guys have a broadcasting role. I think Reggie Miller has some kind of stake in the Atlanta Hawks and NCAA, even though he does do broadcasting for them. So I think it is interesting. Shaq, of course, has always been with Sacramento as well for a long time, or I believe he still is. So I think it's an interesting thing. He wants an active role in that organization. It's an interesting ownership move. I think we'll see what it does for Utah, but a lot of these players, again, getting younger, bringing younger ownership, new ideas to the ownership core in the NBA is a good thing. The bigger story is Alex Rodriguez and billionaire Mark Lore are still finalizing a deal that should be done pretty soon to get the Timberwolves and the Minnesota Lynx finally, the T-Wolves hopefully get a more competent owner than what they've had. I think this brings up a conversation on what Minnesota has had in recent years and how bad they've been with their ownership, because I think we've seen in the NBA more than any other league that if you don't have a good owner, you're not winning a title more often than not, unless you have a guy like LeBron James, And I don't know how A-Rod's going to do, but I think it's important to have that conversation of a lot of this stuff doesn't really start with the head coach. It really starts with bad ownership.
Yeah, I mean, it will be interesting to see how he does. I mean, he's, aside from being a great baseball player, um, he's obviously he's managed to stay relevant in his retirement. I think that kind of speaks to the sort of, I guess, not marketer, but like
Business acumen.
Yeah, that he kind of is. I mean, he's a younger guy. He'll probably have some sort of, like you said, new ideas or whatever, like a Dwayne Wade, and Yeah, and I mean, the guy apparently he's not with J-Lo anymore, so he's probably got some time on his hands.
That was
So,
also a bizarre story that came out 2 days after he essentially
yeah.
bought him.
Yeah, but anyway, that's a whole other thing. But
Popular culture.
yeah, true. But anyways, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I was kind of surprised because I didn't know he was trying to get into owning a basketball team.
He
I
wanted the
figured,
Mets, and he failed on that, so he was like, I'm going to go to Minnesota.
I figured he would have gone after a baseball team first, but
He
hey,
did, and he failed.
Right. So, yeah, whatever works for the guy, I guess. but, but we will see. I mean, they're in such a bad position now that even if he is good, I feel like it'll probably be a little while before we start to notice. So yeah, it's just something that we'll have to keep an eye on, I think.
He'll probably have some new owner NBA syndrome. Brandon, your thoughts on A-Rod and sort of how bad Minnesota has been with their ownership in recent years?
Yeah. I don't know how great someone who has no idea about basketball is going to be.
I'm not sure how much he has knowledge in hoops, but
that's my concern.
Like yeah. That's really my thing. He's a baseball guy, not basketball.
So that's your basically primary concern, is that it feels like he was just trying to own a team.
Yeah, he just wanted. I don't know. It just feels like I want to get the flashy Yeah.
Yeah. 1.5 billion evaluation with that. I don't know. We'll see. It's going to take some time. I imagine he'll be better than the previous owner of the T-Wolves, though, because that was ugly. And that's sort of the biggest thing for me with this is like bad
my
ownership
dog would be
means
a better owner.
I think it goes back to this idea that bad ownership creates bad organizations and creates bad teams more often than not. This is the funniest story of the week for me. Anthony Edwards, Anthony Edwards, the first overall pick, probably going to win Rookie of the Year this year for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Had a Zoom presser after the game on that day that A-Rod bought him. He's like, oh, what do you think about A-Rod being the owner? He's like, I don't know who he is. I literally have no clue who he is. And the way he said it, which I'm not going to play here, but I'm going to show you guys A-Rod's response, is by far the greatest story of the week. And Anthony Edwards, if you guys haven't seen some of his clips on YouTube and stuff, he's the funniest guy in the NBA already. That man is so funny. It's great. So here's what A-Rod wrote. He said, who is he? Hi, Anthony. Hi, I'm Alex. It's like, what's good, my guy?
Wow.
So Anthony Edwards, not knowing who A-Rod is, thoughts on that? Because it seems very sincere, but it's also really funny.
How do you not know who A-Rod is?
I don't know.
Youngsters who don't like baseball.
Youngsters.
Dude, my sister knows who A-Rod is. She's never watched a baseball game in her life. Then again, she also thought that A-Rod played Iron Man, but that's
what?
Really?
Yeah, she was like, didn't Alex Rodriguez play Iron Man? I was like, no, that's Robert Downey Jr. And she said, Robert Downey Jr. plays baseball. She had them backwards. And I was like, no, that's yeah.
That's a new one.
I know, right? But yeah. Regardless, she had some idea.
Again, if you guys don't know about Anthony Edwards' personality, just go search up some of his clips on YouTube. It's literally amazing. And this is just another piece of it. This guy's so funny and just an entertaining dude. It's great. I was dying when I saw this. Just dying. It's awesome. Anything pop culture wise minus J-Lo and A-Rod this week for you guys?
No.
I mean, I don't really care about them. I just kind of made a joke about it because why not? Yeah, no, nothing. Nothing really significant. That I can
Nothing
think
too
of.
pressing this week for sure. So
Yeah.
I think we're pretty good then. So yeah, I don't have much. This has been a pretty slow week. I'm just waiting for the Oscars next week, and then we'll have like a pretty substantial Oscars discussion next week. But other than that, there's not too much going on this weekend. Oh, props to Hideki Matsuyama for winning the Masters on Sunday as well. The putting was horrible this week. Oh my God, it was terrible. But none of the big dogs were really in it. But I believe the first Japanese Masters winner ever. So congrats to him for winning the Masters. And we'll see him when we start talking about the other majors here later in the year. So I just want to shout that out real quick. And that's pretty much it for today. So thank you, Shane. Thank you, Brandon. Hope you both have a great day, and we will see you all next week.
Take care, everyone.
All right. See you all.